This week, Donald Trump did something really disgusting, even for him. He touched Ted Cruz. Ted was so grateful, he oozed his thank you mucus. But this was even more disgusting.
The Trump administration reportedly is taking steps to remove all legal protection for transgender Americans. The New York Times says the Department of Health and Human Services is working to create a legal definition of sex. It would, quote, define sex as either male or female, unchangeable, and determined by the genitals that a person is born with.
It's really something that this dumpo has the gall to tell trans and gender nonconforming people that their gender identity isn't authentic. He doesn't even have a true self. Deep down, he's just a flesh sack of coins, gunk, and porn DVDs. If he ever did actual self-reflection, he would disintegrate into a pile of dry, dusty. I don't know why it's so hard for Republicans to understand that gender and sex are two different things. Gender identity is a person's internal sense of being a man, a woman, some combination of both, or neither. Sex is that sloshy thing your wife hates doing with you. And while we're at it, quote unquote biological sex is determined by a doctor taking a glance at a baby's hoo-ha for 1 second, which means that Trump thinks the best possible system is this fucking guy inspecting baby genitals. For someone who hasn't seen his own junk in years, Trump sure seems obsessed with everyone else's. Actually, let's get real. Mike Pence is obsessed with everyone else's junk. Donald Trump barely knows enough about trans people to hate them.
What about your promise to protect transgender Americans? Are you keeping up on that?
We're looking at it. We have a lot of different concepts right now. They have a lot of different things happening with respect to transgender right now. You know that as well as I do, and we're looking at it very seriously.
We're looking at it very seriously is what Trump says when he does not know what the you're talking about. Transgender is an adjective, not a noun. With respect to transgender right now is straight up nonsense. Look, if you're gonna destroy people's lives, at least bother to learn the word. The thing is, Bad Santa actually did promise to protect trans Americans.
I will do everything in my power to protect our LGBTQ citizens.
Oh, well, he didn't really mean that, huh? What gave it away? That he said LGBTQ like a 3-year-old spelling his name for the first time? Or maybe it was how his administration started chipping away at trans rights the literal moment they got into office.
The Trump administration ended federal protection for transgender students that allowed them to use school bathrooms matching their gender identities.
The United States government will not accept or allow transgender individuals to serve in any capacity in the U.S. military.
The Justice Department released a memo saying that the Civil Rights Act does not protect transgender people from discrimination at work.
The Bureau of Prisons rolled back measures that prevented transgender prisoners from being harassed, assaulted, or sexually abused. These new rules advise to use biological sex as the initial determination on where to place trans inmates.
In less than 2 years, the Trump administration has made it less safe to be trans at school, at work, in the military, and in prison. That's pretty much all the places. But the good news is Mike Pence is now throwing your baby a mandatory gender reveal party. Mike Pompeo must have taken a break from banning dancing in his town because he found time to make the language on the State Department website more transphobic. And all this rhetoric doesn't just hurt trans people when they interact with the state. Believe it or not, the government trying to erase you legally has some emotional consequences as well.
Whether or not it becomes the law of the land is having an impact. There are trans people struggling with their identities, haven't come out yet, thinking about whether this is something they can even bring to their parents, whether they're going to be at risk of being thrown out of the house, cut off of financial support, whether they can survive this initial discussion when they hear this at the dinner table.
And if you're in that situation, I am so sorry. Please know it's not like that everywhere. If you were at my dinner table, all we'd be talking about is my skin tags. You would not believe where I have them. It has never been easy for trans people in this country, but their lives have gotten much worse under Trump. But despite all the hate thrown their way, they're still standing up.
We won't be erased. We're going to say loud and clear to this administration that we are going nowhere. The LGBTQ community is celebrating 50 years next year from Stonewall. We've got a long history. We are going to get through this.
Hell yes, they will. And cis people, we need to stand with them. Transgender people are real and normal, and they deserve so much more than this. And hey, if Donald Trump really, really wants to pretend like someone doesn't exist, pick Ted Cruz. That's how I get through the day.
Honey, it's Pride. That 1 month every calendar year when we celebrate queer people's right to exist. So I went to the legendary Stonewall Inn to meet with Lala Zanel, the trans justice campaign manager at the ACLU. She was gonna tell me all about the history of Pride, which was started by United Airlines, Citigroup, Postmates, Tesla.
No, it started off with trans women of color.
But what about YouTube, Android, the Trump campaign?
Stop it. There's a whole bunch of corporations.
You said corporations like it's a bad thing.
It is a bad thing, Patty. I don't see Black trans women. I don't really even see a lot of non-binary or trans folks in Pride.
Okay. Hypothetical situation.
Okay.
You get a phone call. Hi, it's me, Taco Bell, and I am coming out as non-binary. Would you not show Taco Bell in that moment love and support?
Oh, Patty.
Turns out, 50 years ago, when being openly queer was illegal in most of the country, people came to places like this because it was one of the few spaces where they felt safe. But Stonewall would often get raided by the police, who would harass and arrest patrons with no warning. One night, the queer family at Stonewall got fed up and fought back. Activists like Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera started throwing shot glasses, rocks, and bricks. And in doing so, they began the modern LGBTQ rights movement, which brought us Pride.
It was a liberation birthed by Black trans women, non-binary people, folks of color. It was a riot.
Like this?
Oh my God, I mean...
You know, that's a Babadook. He was probably there. Chucky over here, you know, queer canon, one of our queer icons. You know...
You got it wrong.
I usually hate history lessons, but something about the riot was inspiring me. To throw a brick.
No, we're not doing that.
Fine. But why wasn't Marsha and Sylvia's story part of our modern Pride celebration when the organization that terrorized them gets a marching band?
It's because history has been erased. Trans women fought back to liberate the larger LGBT movement. But after the Stonewall riots, it became about money.
No way Dr. Pepper would let that happen, because Dr. Pepper wants you to be brave. Be you, Dr. Pepper.
No. It's not just about you showing up as a corporation. You have to leverage your resources, leverage your connections to give back to the community.
She's right. It's great that these big corporations seem to want to support the movement, but we can't depend on them to fight for the most marginalized folks in the community.
You make Pride better first when the community acknowledges their faults. The fault of years and years of not centering Black trans women, non-binary folks, folks who are disabled, low income, undocumented. We're going to tell the truth about our history and you appreciate all the historic milestones that trans and non-binary folks have done for the Pride movement.
Yes, and I knew exactly how to help.
You have 2 of them? No, we're not going to do that.
Huh, then I guess I need to find a way to help that isn't brick. So I decided to throw a party to celebrate the true meaning of Pride with tributes to queer icons.
Oh my gosh, she's so pretty.
Healthy snacks. Party favors. I even made my very own Pride float featuring 2 completely original mystery-solving dog cousins engaging in a censored sexual act.
What is this? Did you listen to anything I told you? This is not what I told you Pride was about.
You think on the 50th anniversary of Stonewall that people aren't going to be excited to see Scribby Dong and Scorpy having on and...
No, this is not it, Patty.
Okay, maybe I was still a little confused about our history. So Lala had me talk to a trans woman who lived it.
You were a witness to the Stonewall riots.
Yes, I was. During that period, we were illegal. So I had 2 sets of ID, one under Judy and one under my other name.
Right, you had to pass in order to operate in society in a safe way.
Yes. If you didn't pass or if you were of color, you were in more danger. Every day you'd find somebody got murdered in the streets. It's still going on today.
It's true. Members of our community face violence every day. Trans women of color are being killed across the country. And that's on top of the constant attacks against us, from our bathrooms to our military to our housing to our healthcare to our literal right to exist. In a world like this one, should pride be a celebration? A protest?
We can have both at the same time. If you remember that we came from a place of rebellion, it will help you move forward in your everyday life to continue that liberation, all while looking fabulous and celebrating. Celebrate with a purpose.
Right. So instead of throwing a brick at someone you hate, throw a brick at someone you love.
No, we talked about...
Lala was right. The true meaning of pride is that it's a chance to recognize how far we've come and how far we still have to go. So I teamed up with the Fluid Project, a gender-free retail store, to design a t-shirt to raise money for the Transgender Legal Defense and Education Fund, and remind everyone that we still have a lot more bricks left to throw.
This is not America's finest hour in terms of how we treat trans people. Not that we've had many fine hours. So far, it's pretty much just the premiere of Pose, 6 episodes of Pose, and the season finale of Pose. But here's something that might warm you up a bit.
We got 400 LGBT candidates running for office this year across the board.
The blue wave is a rainbow wave.
What? Waves can be both blue and a rainbow? I sent Ashley Nicole Black to find out more.
This midterm season, a rainbow wave could come to wash a gaggle of vile bigots out of office. And leading this pack of groundbreaking candidates,
America has not seen this before.
Thank you so much.
In Vermont, former electric co-op CEO Christine Hallquist is now the first openly transgender person to win a major party's nomination for governor.
Christine has it all. A progressive platform, a well-run campaign. It's only a matter of time before she has her own Oscar-winning biopic. And that time is now. Last week, I crowdfunded the money from Sam's wallet to head to Vermont and make a heroic profile to help Christine win. Me and Oscar. I'm here to make like a beautiful Oscar-winning film about a woman who's just become like a champion for the people.
Okay, yeah, sure.
So a lot of the national news coverage of your campaign has really focused on your gender identity.
Vermonters don't really care about my gender. I mean, they really care about the issues.
These voters confirmed Christine's gender was the last thing on their mind.
It doesn't even come up.
The fact that she's transgender has very, very, very little to do in why people are or are not voting for her.
It's honestly absurd that as Christine campaigns to quite possibly be the next governor of Vermont, this asshole is trying to define her out of existence. But while our country's policies remain a dehumanizing unknown, Christine is staying focused on what she can do for her state.
Well, the internet's pretty bad. We have this rotting copper infrastructure that's wholly inadequate to run business on.
Wow, Vermont sounds like my idea of paradise, a bunch of people who are nice and don't have the internet.
I've always said technology should be used to enhance the human relationship.
Like Tinder.
I don't know what that means.
Is internet access really a campaign-winning issue? What about Kavanaugh or Kanye or kneeling? What was your top issue when you were deciding to vote for Christine?
It's the broadband issue. It's not even functional to run a business.
Broadband does not reach most of the residences.
I have to say, since I've been here, everyone seems, one, very nice, two, very well informed. Maybe you guys should not get internet.
It's a technology that allows you to work effectively and be part of Vermont.
That's true. I can move here, and if there was internet, I could be a cam girl.
What's a cam girl?
I'm not going to tell you. These were focused, engaged citizens aligning with candidates who best fit their ideals, which gave me hope for our democracy, but not for my Oscar chances. There's got to be a compelling villain somewhere. Maybe Christine's opponent, incumbent Republican and white man, Bill Scott.
We're very respectful to each other.
Come on, Christine.
We've been focused on the issues.
But one of you is a Republican and one of you is a Democrat.
Well, we have differences in how we think, but that doesn't mean we dislike each other.
Is Vermont even in America? Have you considered that maybe Phil has sent you some really nasty emails and you just haven't gotten them yet?
I don't think Phil would.
Because the internet's so bad. This campaign, had literally no villains, just respectful discourse between two people with opposing views.
We do have an underbelly of racism, and I think this gets back to the election of Donald Trump. He's kind of legitimized bigotry.
So what can a governor do to fight that?
I think one of the most important things we can do is start focusing on diversity, directing our tourist dollars to bringing more people of color to our state.
Black people like to vacation someplace warm. Could you build like an indoor water park?
Oh, we've got indoor water parks.
Okay, because people keep trying to tell me to look at a leaf. Nobody told me there was a water park.
Even though I was an outsider, I was welcomed by everyone. So one of Christine's platforms is that she wants to bring more diversity into the state. Are you guys into that?
Yeah,
yes.
thank goodness. I wish we had more diversity.
You're the most diversity-craving white people I've ever met. I'm waiting for Lakeith Stanfield to go, get out! Vermonters are kind, open-minded, super well-informed. This movie wasn't even gonna win a Daytime Emmy.
I was looking to make a movie about like a very cool trans woman overcoming the odds, and I guess now my movie is about a nerd bringing the internet to Vermont.
Yeah, I like the sound of that better.
Oh, I guess Christine's way is better if you want to win a political campaign and actually help people.
You know, we don't need heroes. We need people that are willing to get down and do the dirty work. Knocking on doors, calling people. We're having a pasta dinner tonight. You could join us for that.
Is there bottle service?
I don't know what that is.
Who are you, Christine?
But I decided to try things her way. So I knocked on some doors, and we opened on a beautiful Black woman named Ashley. That's me. And did some phone banking.
How tall are you? Yeah, no, Christine needs to know all of this. This is for her.
And I realized that while I was looking for a villain for my movie, it turns out, Shyamalan twist, the villain was me. I was trying to make Christine fit into my story, but hers is way better. An experienced policy wonk working with her community to protect their most vulnerable, even if Washington won't. But by the time I learned that, I'd already entered this into Sundance.
Coming soon, a movie about an inspiring woman who meets another equally inspiring woman.
Bottle service is when you pay $600 to make your own drink.
That is so stupid. Alexandra Billings is Christine Hallquist.
We need the internet.
I need 2 EGOTs.
You can't handle the EGOT.
Ashley Nicole Black is Ashley Nicole Black. This Oscar season, some heroes do wear capes.
Great, so after this we have just the dance number.
I can't do this anymore. We're finished here. I'm gonna go get people to vote, get them to register, but I've had it.
Wow. Well, I know I won't be thanking in my Oscar speech.
With the U.S. COVID-19 death toll rising and cases topping 3 million, it's hard to imagine any good can come from this pandemic whatsoever. Except for the fact that Pier 1 has gone out of business. I mean, come on, Pier 1. You don't sell furniture, you sell chair-looking baskets. But another step in the right direction is that the FDA, in response to a critical need for blood donations, is easing its restrictions on donations from gay men.
Over the years, the FDA relaxed restrictions, saying gay men could donate, but only if they've been abstinent for a full year. Earlier this month, citing a shortage of blood donors, the FDA changed that deferral period to 3 months.
3 months of abstinence is still a lot to ask, unless you're me from 1993 to 1995. That was my good Looney Tunes t-shirt, by the way. But for most people, there's no amount of free cookies and juice to make up for not having sex for 3 months. To be clear, the restrictions technically apply to men who have sex with men. And over the years, it's included not just gay men and bisexual men, but also pansexual men, non-binary people, trans people, and women who've had sex with men who have sex with men. Basically, anybody who stresses out Mike Pence. Still, gay and bisexual men remain most broadly affected, and now some are even being turned away from donating when their blood could be critical for fighting coronavirus.
Boyfriends Lucas and Joshua were among the first COVID-19 patients in Utah. They heard health officials want COVID-19 survivors to donate blood plasma.
I was like, oh my gosh, that's great. I'm surprised they haven't called us yet.
But there would be no call. Lucas and Joshua aren't eligible because they are gay.
Why would you not call them? That's like refusing to put up the bat signal just because you disagree with Batman's unconventional yet effective methods of masked vigilante justice. But even for gay men who do meet the abstinence requirement, the nerds, the FDA issued the change so suddenly, many blood centers haven't yet had the chance to train staffers or update their computer systems. Even the Red Cross only just managed to implement the change on June 8th, more than 2 months after the FDA's ruling. That's the biggest blood-related mistake since my failed teen vampire novel, Dracula is My Gym Teacher. The twist is he also taught math. While the FDA claims the restrictions exist to protect the blood supply from HIV, health experts and LGBTQ advocates agree it's really just an outdated policy rooted in homophobia and stigma. For one thing, being gay isn't inherently a risk factor for HIV. If you get tested regularly, take PrEP, use condoms, or are in a monogamous relationship with someone who's HIV negative or undetectable, you're very unlikely to contract the virus. The only thing you're likely to get in a monogamous relationship is a deep and abiding understanding of House Hunters International. And by the way, I can't believe we even have to clarify this, but you don't have to be a man who has sex with men to contract HIV. In 2018, 24% of people diagnosed with HIV were heterosexual, and yet the rules in no way apply to heterosexual men. Straight people haven't got that much of a pass since the Hallmark holiday movie AP in the V for Xmas. Guess who's coming for Christmas? Just one of you. And in addition to being homophobic, these restrictions are completely medically unnecessary.
Today, blood banks screen for HIV, the virus that causes AIDS, with an accuracy rate of 99.99%, according to the FDA. Today, the odds of getting an HIV infection through a blood transfusion are 1 in 1.5 million, less likely than being struck by lightning.
I think that the rules should be looked at again by the FDA. There have been great strides in testing for HIV since these rules were enacted. You can get an HIV test in 20 minutes.
Yes, listen to Andy Cohen, people, and I'm not just saying that so he'll invite me to be a real housewife of the woods. Every unit of blood donated in the United States must undergo 13 tests, including 10 for infectious diseases such as HIV. The other 3 are just taste tests for some reason. The FDA has a history of not keeping up with science. Since the early 2000s, we've had the ability to test HIV in blood within 2 weeks after exposure. To be fair, the FDA hasn't been keeping up with the science because they've been too busy keeping up with the Kardashians. FDA Commissioner Stephen Hahn lives for messy drama. So if these restrictions are so unnecessary, why do they exist in the first place? Well, I'm going to tell you the same thing I tell myself every time Mama gets her hands on an 8-ball. Let's go back to the 80s. Back then, HIV was little understood, difficult to detect, and disproportionately killed gay and bisexual men. In 1983, the FDA issued new rules prohibiting gay men from giving blood. It was a decision Ronald Reagan described as nothing, because he wouldn't even talk about AIDS for another 2 years. The FDA's blood donation ban did not meaningfully change for decades. Any restrictions serve to stigmatize gay sex and are psychologically damaging to LGBTQ people. After the Pulse nightclub shooting in 2016, the restriction prevented gay men from helping their own community.
A countless number of people are lining up to give blood in the wake of the attack in Orlando, but a number of gay and bisexual men who want to give can't.
The practice is discriminatory.
I got turned away from being gay, so I just feel helpless, scared, sad, angry.
It's heartbreaking that people who want to donate blood can't. There is almost always a need for blood. There has never been a time when America had such a surplus of blood that blood banks were like, no, we're full. Actually, take ours. You like what? O negative? B negative? But the need is even greater now because of coronavirus. Blood banks all over the country are facing low supply, and to help treat COVID-19 itself, doctors are experimenting with convalescent plasma therapy. A large study found that giving COVID-19 patients transfusions of plasma from people who have recovered from the virus may be beneficial. It's hopeful, the same way I'm hopeful about my second vampire novel. Dracula was my gym teacher, but then he got fired for being weird with students. The FDA's restrictions are blatantly discriminatory, but there's a better, smarter way to screen blood donors. The biggest risk factor for HIV is unsafe sex. That's why GLAAD and more than 500 medical professionals have petitioned to enact policies and protocols which focus on screening for specific high-risk behaviors, regardless of sexual orientation. These would include things like unsafe drug injection, having unprotected sex with a partner who has HIV, or having unprotected sex with multiple partners. I mean, thank God there's no mention of it being unsafe to role play as Best Picture winner Shape of Water. That movie single-handedly saved my sex life. I played the fish. Many countries already use this system for screening. In Spain and Italy, blood centers ask donors if they've engaged in specific risky sexual behavior. It's a very simple, straightforward questionnaire that rules you out if you've participated in any of the following sex moves: the midnight caller, the major dad, the leave it to beaver, the 8 is enough, The Small Wonder, or The Sanford and Son. I mean, yes, those are all TV shows, but they're even filthier sex positions. There's no reason the United States shouldn't also adopt non-discriminatory guidelines. It's a no-brainer. We need blood. Eliminating this restriction would add 300,000 pints of blood to the supply each year, which could save 1 million lives. It would also save what's been a pretty summer so far if they decide to deliver that blood via water slide. Thankfully, we do have some leaders who are desperately trying to drag us into this millennium. 20 attorneys general sent a letter to the Department of Health and Human Services asking them to ease the homophobic rules. And Tammy Baldwin and Adam Schiff are lobbying the FDA to ground their guidelines in science, not homophobia. Unfortunately, as long as the Senate is controlled by Republicans, there's no way a bill can pass. That's why we have to flip the Senate this November to get this bill passed, and because I really want to watch Mitch McConnell cry. Did you know his tears come from his neck? They do.
There's a fight for the soul of the Republican Party. All over this land, yellow-bellied moderates are falling in line or giving up. This is a story of one man who wouldn't.
Republicans in Texas try to demonstrate how right-wing they are. They're sort of racing towards the top of a mountain, holding an AK-47 and a Confederate flag. But there was this anomaly.
So, lights, guys?
Jason Villalba is his own man. He's a pocket square kind of guy.
Sometimes I feel as a bit of a man without a country.
Jason was no ordinary Republican. He had a heart, 0% APR financing, and the highest towing capacity in his class. Damn it, Deborah, this is the wrong script. Oh, here we go. Jason was about to be put to the test.
In this last session, I proposed a bill that added protections to the LGBTQ community when it comes to housing.
Transgender folks are often denied housing because their documents don't line up, so they're outed or they're kicked out of their homes. I just want to know that I'm going to be able to have a safe place to live.
This was a long shot, novel idea for the Texas legislature, but we got a hearing, which means that the bill's moving. You know, I walk in front were almost all Republican committee members.
You don't get to cherry pick who among the public you want to serve and not serve. In other words, you don't get to use...
Why not? Do you want all fashion designers to be required to design a dress for Melania Trump?
I'm not sure how to even respond to that.
If I'm being honest, I didn't think we had a shot, but Jason has a conscience. You can see him struggling with the demands of the far right.
There's just no other word to describe the furthest of the far right other than foolish and ignorant.
And those fools showed up to testify that trans rights would hurt straight people.
House Bill 192 puts women in dangerous situations. I cite a case where they're having sexual assault issues.
If you're going to give me nefarious instances that come from fake news, alt-right news sources, then I'm not going to follow it.
You can disagree with it.
But I'm right.
You're not.
Jason wasn't afraid to do the right thing and vote yes.
Well, I voted no.
Damn it, Jason.
I'm a Republican, and it's orthodoxy not to be supportive of any kind of LGBT measure.
When I say he's a Republican with a conscience, I'm talking about by Texas standards.
I appreciate the time and attention of the committee. Thank you.
But Diego wasn't defeated yet. There was still 1 week before the official final vote, and that's when fate stepped in.
All these texts were starting to come up, and the text came directly from Dr. Steve Hotze in Houston.
I'm Dr. Steve Hotze, CEO of Conservative Republicans of Texas.
He puts a lot of money into these fights to make sure that transgender people do not have the same equality. The money is holding some people hostage.
He wanted me to vote a certain way and was prophesying that if we support the trans community, that we're going to be consumed in the fires.
Perverted boys and men who sexually fantasize that they're women. They want us to accept that and give them minority status, and they want to be allowed to create moral anarchy and sexual anarchy in our kids. They will be encouraged by their teachers to participate in anal sex.
When people are told that they are wrong, that they are wicked, it inspires hate speech and violence against the transgender community. So many people are suicidal or full of anxiety or don't want to leave the house.
It's not my party. My party is the Republican Party. When I received those text messages, it became clear that this was not about non-discrimination ordinances. This was about hating people who are different. And it went right in line with what Diego was talking about. And I thought, you know what? Diego's right. And I said, Diego, I want to talk.
I was like, son of a bitch. I think we have Villalba.
He had 6 votes, he needed 1 more. I said, I want to change my vote. I want to be with Diego.
And with Jason's vote, the bill was passed out of committee.
The plot thickens like caribou stew. You're going to have to remove some of these state Republican representatives that just don't get it.
I am not a man who is concerned or afraid of much of anything. And I said, look, why don't you find your best candidate?
Bring me an opponent. Bring me an opponent next time.
And bring it.
And we are proud to endorse Lisa Luby Ryan.
I'm Lisa Luby Ryan, and I would be honored to have your vote.
Lisa was very formidable. She was a tenacious fighter. So during the campaign, she said something like, Jason Villalba clearly identifies with the LGBT community. It said something like that. And then also, Villalba supports gun control.
My younger son, he had been robbed by 3 black thugs with 9mm guns to his head.
I'm just thinking to myself, there's no way we can lose to someone who just pointed a gun at my head and said 3 black thugs. And we lost by 700 votes. I would rather be right than elected. I definitely feel like a Lone Ranger. I was the first Republican in Texas history to ever vote in favor of the LGBT community. I'll sleep soundly for the rest of my life knowing I did that.
You know, it feels a little awkward to sit here and praise somebody for doing the right thing, one thing once, and can see transgender people as people, and then we're all like, yay, thanks.
Well, at least they passed a meaningful bill.
No, not at all. After that vote, the bill got to the calendars committee, stayed in calendars, died in calendars.
Is there any silver lining?
There's absolutely a silver lining to all of this. Because they've elected the far-right candidate, there's a likelihood that a Democrat gets elected in that district.
So you were playing the long game?
Maybe. It wasn't by design.
And that's the story of how something sort of good might happen later on. Screw it. I'm getting a beer.
As we continue to live through the NyQuil nightmare that is 2020, it's easy to believe that God said he was going out for a pack of cigarettes and then just never came home. Yet, as bad as this year has been, the Supreme Court recently handed down a decision that was a major victory for the LGBTQ community and one that also made my body go, double up,
A historic ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court today outlawing job discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or transgender identity.
I've read the decision, and some people were surprised, but they've ruled, and we live with their decision. That's what it's all about.
The court's decision basically means that the sex part of the prohibiting discrimination because of sex language in the Civil Rights Act also applies to sexual orientation and gender identity.
Gorsuch brushed aside the Trump administration's argument that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was not written with gay and transgender people in mind. An employer who fires an individual for being homosexual or transgender fires that person for traits or actions it would not have questioned in members of a different sex. Sex plays a necessary and undisguisable role in the decision, exactly what the law forbids.
Which is interesting, since Gorsuch is way more familiar with disguisable roles, given all the times he's nearly foiled those muddling kids. The Supreme Court's decision is good news, but there's far more we need to be doing to protect transgender people. It's still incredibly difficult to be trans in America, particularly if you're black. And black trans women have it especially bad.
Black trans women face what activists call triple marginalization, confronting racism, sexism, and transphobia.
Transgender women of color, particularly black transgender women, are disproportionately affected by fatal violence impacted by the intersections of racism, sexism, homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia.
The only way to make that intersection worse is if there were actual street signs reading racism, sexism, homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia, especially if you live there. Even within the larger LGBTQ community, transgender people have faced discrimination and exclusion, despite the fact that they've been fighting for gay liberation from the beginning. Black trans women helped build the Black Lives Matter movement and played a pivotal role in the Stonewall riots. But white people are so good at appropriating, we made ourselves the stars of a movie about it. That's right, white people. If we're not in it, we're not seeing it. Trans women of color have been excluded from the stories of the movements they created. And while their fight is just now getting attention, they've been doing the work to fight against this larger culture of transphobia for decades.
The transgender community is oftentimes marginalized in America. Our stories unheard, dismissed, and discarded.
I've been followed home. I've been stalked. I've had guys try to sexually harass me in just disrespectful ways.
We wake up in a world that is not designed to support transgender people, to welcome us in school, to give us a chance to get an education. Employers are not eager to hire us.
That is truly horrible. The only reason an employer should ever not be eager to hire you is if you walk back in after the interview and say, your bathroom's out of toilet paper. Can't get that resume back? And that is why I did not get The Daily Show. Trans people experience harassment and prejudice at home, school, and work, and they're also routinely misgendered and referred to by their given names or dead names by the press and authorities. Even in some women's movements, trans women are left out by trans-exclusionary radical feminists, or TERFs, who hatefully argue that trans women aren't real women. To which I say to J.K. Rowling, silencio, you cruel rich d***. Trans women are women, and if you disagree, you're not a feminist. J.K. Rowling's stance is deeply disappointing, especially because of her impact on children. It's like if Beverly Cleary released a book titled The Mouse and the Motorcycle and the Blue Lives Matter. Transgender people of color face higher rates of poverty, violence, HIV infection, and 41% of Black trans people report that they have experienced homelessness at some point in their lives. Those are the most shocking statistics I've heard in recent memory, which is saying a lot, since just last week, my 6-year-old daughter informed me that she is 100% that. What's a mother to do? While the Supreme Court's ruling may have protected transgender people in the workplace, 28 states still haven't expanded hate crime laws to protect trans people. And there are still bathroom bills on the floor that prevent trans people from using restrooms that match their gender identity. Bathroom bills are stupid and offensive and unnecessary. I mean, except for my bathroom bill, which is a man named Bill who holds my newspaper for me so I don't have to touch it. And even in New York, a state that prides itself on being progressive, there's an anti-sex worker law that, in addition to being terrible on its own, has the awful side effect of profiling trans women. Commonly called the walking while trans law, trans women are getting arrested just for walking down the street. Walking should never be a crime. And while we're at it, skateboarding should never be a crime either. Come at me, narcs! And if local governments are making life a living hell for trans people, the Trump administration is waging a full-on war. With a new rule, Trump recently removed protections from the Affordable Care Act that ensured healthcare providers can't discriminate against trans people. Trans people already have massive barriers to accessing quality healthcare, which, added to the racial health disparities exacerbated by coronavirus, means that Black trans people have it even harder. And just as terrible, an upcoming Department of Housing and Urban Development proposal will allow single-sex shelters to refuse to accommodate trans people.
When you have a single-sex shelter, and it's there specifically for women who are abused, and then people come in who do not appear to be women, but they say they're women, and you have to accept them, does that impinge upon the rights of those women?
No! Providing safe homes and shelter for people who need them is literally Ben Carson's whole job, especially since he hasn't had an acting gig since the movie Stuck on You. We live in a world where violence against trans people, and especially Black trans women, is commonplace. The American Medical Association has labeled killings of trans women of color an epidemic. There is so much violence happening to Black trans women that we actually can't even measure it.
Last year, the Human Rights Campaign tracked at least 26 deaths due to fatal violence. The majority of victims were Black transgender women. Experts say as shocking as the numbers are, the number of victims could be even higher.
So often they will remain silent. And the data we have is based on the folks who have reported. We don't know about the folks who suffer in silence.
People are suffering in silence because they're afraid for their safety. And one reason Black trans people may not report violence is that going to the police could endanger them even more. One survey of Black trans people found that more than a third of respondents who interacted with police reported harassment, 15% reported physical assault, and 7% reported sexual assault. Those statistics make me want to curl into a ball and scream into my MyPillow. No, it's not a MyPillow. It's my pillow that I made of the MyPillow guy. I hate his politics. I love that his face reminds me of my dad. One state that is particularly cruel when it comes to trans people is Texas.
The Human Rights Campaign says 77% of trans people here in Texas do not have any identification that reflects their preferred name or pronouns.
Tracy was a highly energetic life of the party.
But on July 30th of this year at 3 in the morning, police found the 22-year-old's body. Investigators say Tracy's boyfriend, 25-year-old Joshua Bourgeois, stabbed her multiple times. Tracy's body sat in the morgue for 10 days before HPD finally reached out to the LGBT community for help identifying her.
Far too often, there's no justice when it comes to the murder of Black trans women, and these senseless crimes affect the victims' entire communities.
I've been frightened, but not like this before.
Last month, Dupree's close friend China Gibson and Sierra McIlveen were murdered within days of each other. A week earlier, Jaquarius Holland was killed in another Louisiana town. All of the victims, trans women of color.
What scares me the most is that people will feel like they can get away with these things and nothing will be done about it. How many more people have to be killed before something is done about it?
The correct answer is 0. And following the recent murders of Raya Milton and Dominique Remy-Fells, finally, more people are beginning to acknowledge that. This month, the Brooklyn Liberation March brought together 15,000 protesters to stand up against police brutality and violence against Black trans people.
Black trans lives are especially important because we exist and we are continually treated as if we don't exist. Black trans people are murdered at higher rates than any other community. We are pushed out of jobs, out of housing, out of opportunities, out of resources, and we deserve to be marched for.
Black trans women need and deserve our attention, and we have to fight for them. If there's one thing we need to remember, it's that Black trans lives matter. And if there's two, it's that the MyPillow guy makes a great pillow. Not the MyPillow. My Pillow of the MyPillow guy. Aw, thanks for watching. If you'd like to hear more from Full Frontal, hit subscribe and visit our page for more videos. Or if you'd like to be radicalized, leave YouTube on autoplay.